KMR. All right, welcome back to the BRAP. We're talking Rotary. It's a Rotary day. Well, every day is a Rotary day when we're hanging out at KMR. So I was able to restore or put this Turbo 2 block back together. And this one came in pretty beat up. It had broken apex seals in the rear chamber. So that meant rotor housing and rotor damage. There were multiple issues with the block, leaks, broken bolts, improperly plugged holes. And then once we actually got it apart, we realized that even if it hadn't blown the apex seal, it was on its way to failure as the front end plate stack was starting to lose a bearing. And you can actually see that this is where your Torrington bearing would ride, and the bearing is starting to square off, has pock marks, and has started to actually dig in to that front thrust plate. So you don't know, I mean, it could have gone together with wear, or it could have been set a little too tight. Something could have happened. But basically, if this front end stack fails, these bearings, that metal drops into the oil system. Probably already had some metal going into the oil system. And then that usually causes a front bearing failure because that's where the stack resides. So I'm not going to say that it was lucky that it broke an apex seal, but in the end, this motor was on its way to a bigger failure anyways. And being that it's a rare block, it's a Turbo 2 Series 4 block, which in the US, we're only in production for a couple years. It's not something that you can always easily find parts for. So we were grateful that we were able to source some parts, bring it back together. And this particular block was on a tight budget. Obviously, we'd love to replace every component with new anytime we have the opportunity. But in this case, we did source some good low miles components, and we're able to, I'd say, restore this Turbo 2 block, which is a Series 4, which in the United States would have been from 1986 to 1988. And it does have the small castings, so you do have some limitations on your boost. I'd say 14 to 16 pounds. But depending on porting, you can easily clear 400 horsepower at the wheels without any big structural modifications. This particular block came in with some really rough porting, and no porting done to the exhaust. So rough, aggressive intake ports and no exhaust porting. So we were able to open up those exhaust ports. Since we had to replace one rotor housing anyways, we opened up the exhaust ports and we matched up all the intake and gave it a proper half bridge. So it's gonna sound good, it's gonna brap hard. New apex seals, E&J seals, new bearings, new side seals, all set to tolerance. We side cut the rotors after matching them because we had to replace one rotor. So it wasn't a full race build, but this is definitely a performance build, and it was definitely a restoration project, being that we had so many things to tackle. Not only, like I said, did it have the obvious damage, but there was hidden damage, and then a lot of just block issues, having to remove broken off bolts, plugging holes, and cleaning everything up to our best ability. There was some stuff we just couldn't take care of, or the customer is going to take care of it themselves. So it was nice. You don't see a lot of these, and especially ones that aren't either jumping to the Series 5 castings or getting studding. But, I owned multiple Turbo 2s, and with a decent turbo, some decent tuning, decent fuel, 400, 500 horsepower, within the range of their reliability is great. And if we ever need to, we can always open this back up, throw some studs in there, and then it could easily get up into those 600, 800 plus horsepower range. Really, the only limitation on the early turbo blocks was casting strength, and that can be damaged either by detonation, tuning, fuel delivery, ignition related, or just total boost. But even if you're not able to stud the block, just adding like an oil pan brace or little things like that always do help. So just kind of being mindful of what the reliability is. This is a very reliable block as long as you don't exceed its overall limits. So I think that's a wrap. We covered some of the details, the parts, a lot of new OEM parts, all new OEM side seals, corner seals, springs. Like I mentioned, E&J apex seals. They are 2 millimeter. That's my preference unless the motor's already been modified. And we did opt with new bearings, cleaned them up, polished them, polished the shaft. And then I did bump up the oil pressure regulator as well to a race regulator, just so, being that it is a Bridgeport side cut rotors, the potential is for 9,000 RPM. That's where it's probably going to be happy in that 8 to 9 range. So I wanted to make sure the oiling system was also up to par. All right, that's a Brap, little turbo 2 block. It's got to ship out, looks good, it's going to sound great. Anybody has questions, needs service, needs parts, let me know. We're happy to help at Mazda Tricks or KMR. I'm a Brap on out of here.